Hi, and welcome to another episode of Incentivized. I'm Glenn Reynolds. Well, Grover Norquist and John Lott are the authors of Debacle, Obama's War on Jobs and Growth and What We Can Do Now to Regain Our Future. And we're joined by Grover Norquist, who's also with Americans for Tax Reform, here to talk about it. Welcome, Grover.
Delighted to be with you.
Well, so why this book and why now?
Well, the book is about a little bit how we got into the mess, Fannie and Freddie, but mostly the reaction, what Obama and Reid and Pelosi did to fix the recession, and how all that overspending and then the commitments to future overspending in Obamacare, the threatened tax increases, have all created one of the most anemic recoveries. I mean, we're technically in recovery. We've had, economic growth positive rather than negative for the last 33, 34 months. The challenge is in terms of job creation, new job starts, new business starts, GDP growth. This is the weakest recovery that we've seen going back to the Great Depression. Why? And then lastly, what do we do to reverse this damage and strengthen the economy?
So why are we experiencing the weakest job growth in any recovery since the Great Depression, and actually probably ever?
Yeah. Well, you can compare how Obama reacted to the recession, Keynesian overspending. I mean, $1 trillion, 4 different stimulus packages, the one big one and then 3 others, $1 trillion in stimulus spending, just taking money from some people and either borrowing it in debt or taking it in taxes and then spending it. And the idea that taking a dollar from one side of the country and sending it to the other somehow, according to Keynesian economics, is supposed to give you roughly $2. It's nonsense on the face of it, but that was the theory. Of course, it not only just moves jobs or money around, but worse. It says to the person foolish enough to work on Saturday and to invest and save, we're going to take more of your money. And it says to the person who wants to vote for a living rather than work for a living, sit tight, I'll send more cash. So it both subsidizes sloth, non-work, non-investment consumption, and taxes, savings, investment. So it damages future economic growth. The threats of the additional cost in Obamacare, that makes it difficult for people to decide they want to commit to hire additional people a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, because you don't know exactly what the cost being tacked on by Obamacare is. The government itself has doubled their estimate of the cost of Obamacare, and the bill hasn't even taken effect yet.
Well, one of the interesting things that I've noticed about dollars moving around the country is that when I go to Washington, I hate to make a Hunger Games analogy here, but you go to the capital city and everybody's rich and everybody's well-fed. And, Roger Simon and I were there for our PJTV thing back in the fall, and we were in a restaurant where they were advertising Wagyu beef, $98 steaks and everything on the wall. And Roger said, this is the kind of thing I used to see in Hollywood, but now Hollywood's not spending money like this. And you go to the seat of the government where it used to be a lot of sort of, middle class, upper middle class civil servants dining out relatively cheaply, and you see just this absolute excess, and you don't see the boarded up storefronts and stuff that you see at strip malls, even in a place like Knoxville, which hasn't done all that badly in the recession. Is a lot of this really just about sucking a lot of money into Washington so it can be spent on Washingtonians?
Well, look, it's hard work to manage the expropriation of other people's earnings and wealth and to share it with your friends. And I think that the people who do that kind of hard work should be meaningfully compensated. So that's why D.C. has all of the very nice, you can buy all the nicest cars. There are more Mercedes-Benz sold in this area than other places, more high-end cars than other cities of similar size. And as you point out, the restaurants are nicer, and the values of all the houses have not declined.
Well, you use a term in the book that sort of goes with this, because it's not just the spending and it's not just the taxing. Perhaps an even bigger drag on the economy is actually what you call regulatory thuggery. Why don't you tell our viewers what you mean by that?
Well, I mean, Obama did the opposite of everything Reagan did. One of the things we do in the book is compare the Reagan recovery, which was robust, created 4 million jobs in its first year, and real economic growth, 6 and 8% a year. And this recovery, maybe 1% economic GDP growth, and just limping along, maybe 1 million new jobs, and an economy whose workforce is 1.5 times what it was when Reagan was there. And Reagan reined in spending. Obama dramatically increased spending. Reagan cut marginal tax rates. Obama's promising to increase marginal tax rates. Reagan deregulated, frankly, with the help of Democrats, trucking, airlines, buses, all of the deregulation that took place, saving tens of billions of dollars a year. And what Obama's done on regulation is dramatically increase the regulatory burden. The new banking bill has thousands of pages of yet unwritten regulations, and if you're a bank, you've got to guess what you're going to be putting up with. If you're in a hospital or a doctor or insurance, if you're in the healthcare industry, you're just guessing about the cascades of bureaucratic paperwork that are now going to be put between citizens and their doctors, individuals and their healthcare. So there's a massive regulatory burden. And frankly, regulations like spending can be thoroughly corrupted. We're seeing money go to groups like Solyndra, and we're seeing regulatory advantages or disadvantages handed out the way cash is to friends.
Yeah, do you think there's any real hope for economic recovery and much less deficit control so long as Obama stays in office? You think he'll come back in his second term
no,
like Bill Clinton as sort of a Republican?
I sincerely doubt that, because he's done a number of things in his first term that were not to his advantage, that you only would do if you were truly ideologically committed to a left-wing vision. He could have done repatriation and allowed about $800 billion in overseas earnings to flow back to the United States the year before his election. It would have done more for the economy than the phony stimulus package. It would have been great for economic growth. But he couldn't stand the idea of allowing American companies who earned money overseas to bring it back to invest and create jobs here if Washington didn't get its vig. He could have helped his reelection efforts, and he chose not to because he was so ideologically rigid. I think you'll see that in a second term. He will be free from any constraints about his own reelection. We saw he played a little fast and loose with the lives and careers of dozens and dozens of Democratic congressmen. They all went down the chute, and 6 senators and hundreds, 500-600 state legislators and bunches of governors all got wiped out on the altar of Obama's left-wing impulses. But Obama, if he is protected and gets to reelected, I think he'll be more like that and even less interested in the needs of the modern Democratic Party to look reasonable in the future. He's not Clinton, who just wanted to hang out in Washington, punch the ticket of be president, and meet girls. Obama wants to change the United States government, the American people, and the world in a deliberate left-of-center way.
Well, do you think the public fully appreciates the scope of the problem? I mean, we've had the Tea Party movement, which sprung up almost instantly once Obama got in, and that's been going on for a while with a substantial amount of influence. But do you think that the broader public outside the Tea Party movement really understands what's going on and what the stakes are?
Not completely, and one of the challenges is to discuss Bill Clinton during his term was for you to sound like you were pornographic, describing Bill Clinton. To describe what Obama's doing in the mountains of regulatory burdens, the threatened tax increases, the destruction of wealth by not letting us go after oil and natural gas and nuclear power and coal, you sound hysteric. I mean, to describe what Obama's doing makes you sound a little bit unhinged because you're describing something that's so horrific and so damaging to economic growth and to people's lives. So it's difficult to communicate how problematic the Obama administration is, how dangerous and destructive it is. Here is why I think the Republicans will hold the House, win the Senate, and elect a different president. And that is because the Democrats have unwisely put the lapsing of all of the tax cuts of the last decade 2 months after the November election. Smart politicians put tax collection day on April 15th and election day in November, so that you're on the other side of the universe as far away as you can get time-wise from tax collection to voting. Now we're going to vote, and we're going to be able to almost touch the date 2 months ahead when $494 billion in tax increases hits in 2013. The alternative minimum tax goes from hitting 4 million Americans to 31 million Americans. This is the tax imposed to get 115 people 40 years ago. Will now hit 31 million. The tax on individuals will go up over 40%, on small businesses up towards 45%. I mean, these are devastating tax increases. You can quantify them, and if Obama loses, none of them will happen. If Obama wins, all of them will happen. If Obama loses, Obamacare is gone. If Obama is elected, Obamacare is here to stay. I think it's going to be very difficult for Obama to, focus on whether Romney's a Mormon or whether he worked too hard earlier in his life and has too much money, or his wife has too many kids, whatever it is he wants to talk about, other than the looming Damocles sword over the American economy, which are these tax increases and spending explosions, both created, and both will take place if Obama's elected. Both can be avoided if he is not reelected. I believe the economy will be about those pending tax hikes and spending increases.
Thank you so much for joining us. One way, of course, for people to really appreciate the scope of the problem is to purchase a copy of your book, Debacle, Obama's War on Jobs and Growth, and what we can do now to regain the future. So let's hope that lots of them read that and pick up on what's going on and think about it between now and November. Thanks for joining us, Grover.
Good to be with you, Glenn.
And thanks to all of you for joining us, too. That's it for this week's Incentivized. We'll be back next week. And in the meantime, have fun on the internet. Thanks.